Did you know you could do this in Siege?
Hello, Colossus.
In this video, I'll be talking all about Skopos, the groundbreaking defender with the ability to switch between two bodies at any given time. Her gadget consists of the V10 Pantheon shells, and we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about how these things work. This pair of remote-operated robots is great for deep roams and catching your opponents by surprise. To learn about everything else that came in Operation Twin Shells, like the Siege Cup beta, click the link in the description, and thanks again to Ubisoft for sponsoring this video. Last time I covered Rainbow Six Siege, things weren't going particularly well. Apparently things are better now? Skopos is the relatively new operator added at the beginning of Operation Twin Shells, which is already almost over if you can believe it. In fact, Year 9 in general for Rainbow Six Siege is almost over, which is a little crazy to think about. Siege is about to become a decade old, and in less than a decade, it'll be old enough to vote. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to get political in the NATO propaganda game. Author's note, I'm not throwing the term propaganda around loosely. I'm throwing it around as a compliment. Skopos is Rainbow Six's way of creating a teleporting character without saying that it's a teleporting character, and there's a good reason for this. Unlike Valorant, a child game, look to cartoon graphics to make kid player happy like children's show, Rainbow Six with Dark Quarter and realistic gun, Ubisoft had to implement the teleporting in a way that made sense. She is one operator, but Skopos, the person, the call sign, is not present on the map physically. She controls the robots from a distance remotely. That's the lore explanation for it, if you will. So that begs the question, what is the mechanical design here? Well, it should be noted that it's not really a teleport mechanic in the way you might think of. It's more like a body swap mechanic. Skopos, the operator, consists of two humanoid robots named Colossus and Talos. I'm not gonna call them Colossus and Talos throughout the video, but they can move and shoot, just like a conventional siege operator. Skopos controls one of these robots at a time and places them in alternating states. Active, which is the moving and shooting part, and passive, where it looks like this. Well, what is that? This passive mode for the robot is essentially a combination deployable shield and bulletproof camera, which is kind of like a combination Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, except it has nothing to do with food, and my fat ass is not gonna make it. Before I get into the actual tactics and gameplay tips, there's a lot of background on this character. She has a ton of interactions, as I'm sure you can probably guess, so just bear with me for this part. I know the average person's attention span is shrinking to the size of this walnut, but that's beside the point. Now, let's get this detail out of the way. If you die when you're playing the active shell with Skopos,
thank you,
you're dead forever. No, Skopos herself doesn't actually die in the chair in the ATF van outside Oregon, but you cannot continue fighting after sustaining a death in a Skopos shell. If your passive shell dies, that's the camera shield shell, you'll be okay. You can't body swap to the destroyed shell anymore, but you can still do operator stuff. Now, being that you are switching back and forth between two robot bodies, that means you are a robot. And the game mechanically follows some internal logic in terms of what can and can't affect you. For instance, your passive robot body can be Brava hacked, and it doesn't make the camera into something that is usable, but it will cause the robot to overheat and eventually shut down permanently. Skopos can get on cams and attempt to activate countermeasures to prevent this, but she has to do that manually, like you would anytime you get on cameras, and that obviously makes you vulnerable. Here's another interesting quirk. If you have a Takebi on the attacking team and you take down the passive robot body, you can hack a computer thing that falls on the ground and hack into cameras like you would from a conventionally dead operator. You are also vulnerable to fire damage in both the passive and active shells, in case you were wondering. Now, there are other things operators get to do that don't affect you. For instance, you're not affected by Smoke's gas grenades or Fenrir's mines. You can't wear Rook armor, and you can't be stimmed by Doc or Thunderbird health gadgets. And there's no such thing as down but not out with Skopos. That mechanic will never happen to you. You cannot be stimmed by Doc, but you can stim yourself as Skopos if your active body gets damaged, even as far down as 1 HP. You can swap to the passive body and get full health once again. It goes without saying then that the bodies will retain their health throughout the course of the game, but that is a neat little trick. Skopos has the active presence of being a capable gunfighter while also having great passive utility. So you really get the best of both worlds with her, and you have a lot of strategic flexibility that you can plug into any site without taking things away from her team. If we look at the deployable shield, it's honestly more like an Osa shield. The bulletproof glass in the top gives you a pretty big sight picture that's really easy to use. So just think about how powerful Osa's ability is on attack. Yeah, you can reposition wherever you like as a defender, and it has a camera on the front too. She also has an option of using impact grenades or proximity alarms. I usually use impacts. In the prep phase, I focus on where the passive body can go first. I like to place it a lot like a conventional deployable shield, and I'll often just swap typical deployable shield positions with a Skopos setup. Just to be clear, you do run the risk of that passive body getting destroyed, just like a conventional deployable shield, as it is vulnerable to the same things. So just keep that in mind if you decide to do so. But it will make the attackers use their resources too, and that's nice to have in and of itself. An alternative is to place your Skopos passive off in a distant position that may not be detected at all, and you can use it as a flex flank later. If you're playing CCTV, you can play as a sight anchor and occasionally swap back and forth between the camera and bathroom, for example. Keep in mind, like all cameras, the passive shell has a microphone, and you can use that to gauge if people are flanking towards construction side. This is just one example out of many where you can employ Skopos as a back pocket flank in case you ever want it. Now keep in mind, the body swap does take time and does make noise, so if you're going to commit to that, you got to do it sooner rather than later. Also, the animation can reveal your position given the right circumstances. So what this looks like in the context of a full round is that of either a deep or a shallow roam, combined with the rotational option of a sight anchor. What I like to do with Skopos is just go for a deep roam. Sometimes those deep roams can be in traditionally dangerous positions where you might call, I'm playing life, which is what you'd say if you have the expectation of eventually dying while fighting for that map control. With Skopos, you don't have to give up that life. You can just take your fights, and then when things start to heat up too much, you can swap back to your sight anchor robot and call it a day. This allows Skopos to be a threat at any time if the attackers can't find the location of your passive body. What also shouldn't be understated is her powerful gun. She gets an assault rifle on defense with a pretty middle-of-the-road fire rate, but it's got high damage per shot and virtually no recoil to speak of. You can basically laser people on pixels from across the whole building, and if you miss the headshot, you're still going to take them down in 3 to 4 shots. It makes Skopos a considerably lethal piece of leverage at any gunfight distance, meaning that you don't have to get picky with your positioning. As long as you're on the same floor as an opponent, you can make a play. Smart players can work around this. Sometimes I've seen players put claymores on the passive robot in hopes of shutting down a flank and getting a pick too. It's up to your discretion to get the timing of when to teleport and when not to teleport. But that ability is going to scale with your situational awareness and your game sense awareness. Skopos is a versatile operator that you can fit into a wide range of compositions, and her guaranteed value makes her a solid solo queue operator. If you're looking for a new operator to play more often, give Skopos a try. I challenge you to bring Skopos into your next ranked game and try to get more aggressive with the passive body placement. Hide it on the alternate take that the attack might pivot to in case the main one doesn't work. For instance, on Oregon, you could hide the shell in the top tower position if they forego the main wall, and you can play to contest the attic entry. If this video increased your Siege IQ, please share it with your friends and tell me what your favorite part about Skopos is in the comments. To learn about everything else that came in Operation Twin Shells, like the Siege Cup beta, click the link in the description, and thanks again to Ubisoft for sponsoring this video. Deuces.